Hello and Assalamu alaikum everybody. I hope you all are doing well. So today we'll be covering a past paper and that's directly focused on the chapter of family. In my previous video, I covered 2016 May-June P1. So in this video, I'm going to break down this video into two parts. So in my first video, which is this one, I'll be discussing the questions of family with you, the family chapter questions with you, and in the next video, hopefully soon inshallah, I'll be making that video, and that will be in that video I will be discussing questions related to the chapter of education, right? So let's just start with question number 1, part A. Okay, so our first question is always a 2-mark question, and in your P2 you get these sets of questions. You get 2, 4, 6, 8, 15, like I always say, from 4 different chapters, that is media, education, crime and deviance, and family. And you have to attempt 2 sets. You have to attempt either from, for example, you choose to attempt the set of family questions, and then you choose to attempt the set of education questions. So you have choice that you have to attempt 2 sets out of 4. So yeah, that was just a background. And always first in that set, the first question is always a 2-mark question. And in that 2-mark question, so in this 2-mark question, the examiner has asked us what is meant by the term domestic violence. So you might have heard the domestic violence in your everyday life, and it is being thrown around everywhere, but we don't really understand what do we exactly mean by the term domestic violence. So a mainstream conception that everybody thinks of domestic violence is hitting somebody. Yeah, this is the answer. Yes, you can say the domestic violence is when you physically abuse the other person, but this is a very partial definition, because domestic violence is a very broad term. So we only limit violence to the physical violence. Now violence can be emotional, violence can be sexual, violence can be psychological, right? Emotional and psychological are one and the same thing, right? So there can be 3 different types of violences. So in this question you have to write that violence, first you need to define what is violence, okay? So you say that domestic violence is when you try to physically hit somebody, when you try to emotionally abuse, when you try to physically, emotionally, and also sexually abuse the other person. Now I'll try to break down each of these terms and explain it to you. So what is physical abuse? You know that you're hitting somebody, that is physical abuse. What is emotional abuse? Emotional abuse is when a person gets aggressive towards the other person, when they shout, when they scream, when they throw things. But it's not necessary that thing, what they're throwing or whatever, how they're venting out, will hit the other person. It's the emotional abuse. It's being aggressive. It's scaring somebody off because you're so angry, because you're so aggressive. So that basically emotionally tortures the other person, right? So this is also one kind of abuse. So I talked about physical abuse, then I'm talking about emotional abuse. Third kind of abuse is sexual abuse, when you try to harm the other person's body. So yeah, when you try to harm the other person's body without their consent, without their will. So you see that domestic violence is a very broad term, and I'm discussing that in detail so that you might not forget it. Obviously it is a 2-mark question, you need to write in a very summarized manner. So you say that domestic violence is when you abuse the other person physically, psychologically, emotionally, and you explain those terms. You explain in one line, you explain that what is physically, when you abuse the other person physically, that is hitting somebody, emotionally, that is being aggressive towards somebody, sexually, that is harming the other person's body without their consent, right? And I've written the definition. I've written this answer from the marking directly. I'm just explaining to you in much more detail. So violence, abuse, or threatening behavior by men or women against their partners or their family members. Okay, threatening behavior, like I said, it can be emotional exploitation, it can be emotional abuse, it can be physical abuse, and it can also be sexual abuse, right? So yeah, so you need to write 2 points. If you only write the domestic violence is when you physically hit the other person, when you hit the other person, when you threaten the other person, you might get partial marks. But if you try to explain that term, if you use these terms like emotional abuse, psychological abuse, and sexual abuse, and you explain them, then the examiner is going to give you 2 marks, because the examiner will understand that the other person is getting what is meant by the term domestic violence. I hope after listening to this, you will now not forget that what is meant by the term domestic violence, right? So let's just move on to our next question. Okay, so in our set of questions, the next question is always a 4-mark question. So in this 4-mark, the examiner has asked us, describe 2 functions that the family may no longer perform in modern industrial societies. So like I told in my previous video as well, so this is a 4-mark question. You need to write 2 points and then you need to elaborate those 2 points, right? So for example, you say that now in modern industrial societies, first family. So I'm just giving a background. You don't need to mention this background at all. It's just for your understanding that in before modern industrial societies, in pre-industrial societies, there was no concept of school. So basically, what parents did was homeschooling. And nowadays we also see some kind of homeschooling, but that's on a very small scale. But there are very few people who are choosing to homeschool their children, because schools have become highly specialized agencies of socialization, whereby children are learning everything. So they're learning the literate as well as the numerate skills, and also different life skills and other interpersonal skills that can make them competent members of the society, right? So one function that definitely now the family is no longer performing is basically, so you can give an overview that in pre-industrial times, children were either homeschooled or they were working in factories or in fields. But nowadays, school has become a specialized agency of socialization, whereby children are learning the literate and numerate skills and also the different interpersonal skills that can make them competent members of the society, right? So this function, now you've explained that the function of education, what do education systems do, and how is it now being performed by the education system. Okay, so now it's not being performed by family, right? So one point is covered. Next, so previously there was less development in science and technology, and reproduction was only and also the societies were not so liberal towards having children out of wedlock. So now you see that partners are cohabiting and they're having children out of wedlock. So reproduction is no longer being performed in inside that wedlock, inside the wedlock. So now societies are becoming more liberal. Now people are not choosing to marry. So reproduction, you could say that it's no longer mainly associated to family, to a family, right? And also reproduction is being formed through different ways. So there is surrogacy. Surrogacy is a new form, or is a new technique of having children. So what is surrogacy? Surrogacy is the practice of having your child in another person's womb, right? And due to the advancements in science and technology, now you can basically, after your sperm and egg mates, you can basically insert it in another person's womb, right? And then they're going to keep that child in their womb for 9 months, and then you can basically, and that's all paid. So that's a paid process. For example, mostly Indian women do that they basically keep the child in their womb, for another person for 9 months, and then the baby is delivered. They give that to the person of whom they're keeping, and then the person is going to pay them a very hefty amount of money. So no longer do you see that family is really important, or marriage, you could say, is really important to carry out this function of reproduction. Okay, so the third point that I've mentioned is about social control / socialization. So like I was telling you before as well, that mainly in pre-industrial times, family was responsible for homeschooling, for basically for telling their children what is morally correct, what is morally bad, what is good, what is bad. So generally family was entirely socializing the kid to become a competent member of the society, and to tell them what is right, what is wrong, how to respect others, how to be, how to dress in appropriate way, how to behave in different situations. But now you see that there are other agencies of socialization, and you could agree with me that, for example, media is very latently, in a very hidden manner, socially controlling individuals into behaviors that socially controlling individuals, and also telling them what behavior is expected out of them. For example, so my favorite example would always be how men and women, how girls and boys are socialized each into their own gender by media. So media is full of I could just say I could just go on and on. I could just go on the series that we see on Netflix, or our own our own national dramas, where we see what roles are associated with men and women. So from that time onwards, when a child is exposed to media, even to cartoons, you see how men are behaving, you see how women are behaving, and you also see what is expected out of me, how I should behave as a man or as a woman, as a boy or as a girl, right? So for example, women are mostly, you see that in dramas, you see women, now there has been a change, but mostly the mainstream that you see that women are quiet, women do not express themselves so much, and women who are expressing themselves so much are seen as evil, or they're seen in very negative light. And men are shown as very physically strong, as macho men who do not have any emotions and feelings, they do not cry. But on the other hand, you see women are crying, right? So you are very not, social control isn't that you are, it's not coercion. You're not placing a stick on somebody's head and telling them, oh, you need to behave like this. No. So what I'm trying to bring across is that media is basically, in a very soft, soft power, in a very soft way, is manipulating, or you could say guiding, whatever way you want to use it, is guiding people or manipulating people to behave in such and such way. The second could be your peer groups, okay? So the friends that you make, they have a very big influence on you. For example, if you have friends who are working hard, who want to make their careers, who want to excel in everything, so you're going to copy that. And that is going to socially control you. How is this going to socially control you? You're going to work hard. You're not going to play around all the time. You're going to work hard. You're going to focus on your grades, and then you're going to reach somebody. So that is latently and very, in a soft manner, this is going to control you, right? So you're not going to always play those video games. You're going to sit down and work hard. And this could be other way around. So your friends are going out on parties, or your friends are not interested in making their career, or your friends are more interested in fashion or makeup, in video games. So you'll also move towards that way. So you're socially being controlled in such and such way. Okay, so I've mentioned these 3 points. You see, there is reproduction, there is education, there is social control. I've written socialization because that is intermingled. And out of these 3, you need to just choose 2, right? And you need to explain them. So you write that education is no longer being performed by the family. Why? Give reasons for that. Reproduction is no longer being performed by the family because now you see most of the children are being born out of wedlock, right? So you could give reasons for that, because now having children out of wedlock is not seen in Western societies. It's not seen as a very immoral act. So society in a way is accepting that change. Okay? So you see, you write these 2 points of education and reproduction, and you explain them why they're no longer being performed by the family in modern industrial societies, and you get full 4 marks, right? Okay, so now moving on to our next question, which is a 6-mark question in the set of questions that we are discussing. So in the 6-mark question, the examiner has asked us, explain how the family can said to be patriarchal in modern industrial societies. So first of all, a number of students have asked me, how do we approach the question in the correct manner? So in order to approach the question in the correct manner, you need to understand the question correctly. As cliche as it may sound, that your teachers may tell you, and it was also told to me before when I was also a student, that the answer is really present in the question. And how is that present in the question? It's when you understand the question correctly, when you break down this question, when you simplify this question, when you exaggerate that question in your own words, you can come up with, you know the answer. I know you all are a smart bunch of students, and everybody knows. And you people who are sociology and people who are studying sociology, students of sociology, when you start doing the past paper, obviously you've gone through the syllabus, you've gone through the content, and obviously what's being asked to you is not something that's out of context, right? So you all know the answer. What you don't know is that how to break down that question. What you don't understand is how to simplify that question. So if you try to simplify this question, simply what they're asking you is that how is family said to be patriarchal in modern industrial societies? Now, patriarchal or patriarchy, whatever I'm using patriarchy because that sounds easy, and we're also throwing this word around like we throw around domestic violence, patriarchy, and other words like norms and values, but we don't truly understand what do we mean by those terms. Okay, so over here you need to understand what is meant by the term patriarchy or patriarchal. So patriarchy is when men hold a superior position in the society, right? Society, and opposite to patriarchy is the word matriarchy. So matriarchy is when women dominate in the society, but patriarchy is when men hold a superior position, when men hold a dominant position in the society, right? So now you understand this question correctly. If you in a very more in a simplistic way, so if I would to replace patriarchy, what has the examiner literally asked you? They've asked you, how can the family said to be a patriarchal institution? So with leaving aside patriarchy, we're saying like this, okay, how can the family said to be a place where men dominate, right, in the domestic space? This is a more simplistic way to rephrase that question for you, right? So first, break down the question for you, understand what is meant by the term patriarchy, understand what the examiner is asking you. Examiner is simply asking you, how can the family said to be a space where men hold a dominant position? What is happening in that family space? What is happening when two partners are living together with their children? So, or without the children. So there's, rule number 1, or this is a golden rule that you need to remember while solving your past papers, while going out and while going out and attempting your CIE or your school papers, is that examiners, they love when you quote scholars, okay, when you quote sociology scholars, because these scholars have done some work. They've put in years of research to come to a conclusion, right? So for example, Parsons, Durkheim, Marx, Engels, and Oakley. So these are different researchers, these are different scholars who've put years of their life into years of their life researching something. So first of all, we have a scholar. So over here you need to mention 3 points. This is a 6-mark question. You need to justify this with 3 points, and your claim is what the claim that you're justifying, or the assertion that you have is that assertion that the examiner has posed before you is that how can the family said to be a patriarchal space or a space where men dominate? So first of all, you're going to say this, you're going to argue, or you're going to support this by saying your claim. You agree that the family is a patriarchal space, and the examiner is asking, explain how. So I've tried to explain the question for good 3 minutes to you. I'm not talking about the answer right now. Now I'm moving on to the answer, and that's for your benefit. It may seem like I'm exaggerating, but if you start to do things in much more detail, if you start to take small little steps before jumping on to conclusion, before jumping on right into the answers, before just skimming through the mark scheme, you are learning a lot. But if you open the marking scheme, you just in a wishy-washy way, you just go through these points, then you're not really learning something. So with this explanation for good 3 to 4 minutes that I'm explaining to you the question, you're at least getting an idea of how to break down the question, how to make it more and more easy for you. That's why I'm reiterating it again and again. Okay, so now moving on to our answer. So I've mentioned a couple of points. So for first, like I told you that they love scholars and you need to quote scholars, right? Because this is going to give weightage to your answer. This is going to make your answer more impactful. Like we quote somebody, for example, you write answers in history, or you write answers in Islam math. So you quote different scholars that this and this person said this, Benjamin Franklin said this, or Obama said this, or Quaid-e-Azam said this. So you're quoting notable personalities to make your answer, to make your argument, to make your assumptions, assertions more notable. Simply this is the same thing that you need to do with your sociology answer. So you're quoting Duncombe and Marston. So Duncombe and Marston were 2 scholars, and they carried out a research study in which they found out that how can family said to be a patriarchal space or a space where men dominate is because women at the end of the day, women are suppressed under that double burden. Now, what is that double burden? Double burden is when women in this modern industrial society, where women are part of the economy, they're going out and doing the paid labor, right? And they're coming home and also doing the household chores. So they're doing the paid work, going out and earning for the family, and they're also coming back and looking after the children. So doing the unpaid work, right? And men, on the other hand, are just going out and earning. right? But so they're specifically talking about a family arrangement where both the partners are earning. So in that case, more burden falls upon women. So they basically carried out research studies, and they found out that women end up doing more work, right? So the family and men come home, and they rest and they chill, and they rest and chill after going out and doing work. And women are the one who basically handling the household, managing the household. So women end up doing more work. And then there are Marx feminists. You can say this is a continuation of that argument, but this can also be a separate point. So Marxist feminists argue that men are the one who are dominating. Again, why? Because women face a triple burden. First, they argue that the women are exploited in the labor market, right? When they're not, when they're not occupying high positions in the labor market because of the glass ceiling. Now, what is glass ceiling? Glass ceiling is when women cannot climb up the social ladder because tied to this, because they have homely duties, because they have to look after the children, they cannot devote a lot of time to work, and because they do not have more opportunities to further study or take more courses or take more training, because obviously at the end of the day they have to look after the children and give time to that. So this makes up two burdens. So first, they're being exploited by capitalists who are giving them low wages. This is what Marxists say, right? And why are they being exploited? Because the conditions have been made like this, okay? So like I was explaining to you before as well, they have to look after their home, their children. So the Marxists argue that they're being exploited by the capitalists. Secondly, they're being exploited in the home space, where they end up doing more work by men. They're exploited by men who were not doing as much work that women are doing, right? So looking after the household or doing the household chores. And third burden is the emotional and the psychological burden. Now, what is that? So emotional burden or psychological burden is when the women comes home, they're doing the paid work, they're also doing the unpaid work. When they come home, they need to psychologically and emotionally soothe down or calm down their husband and also their children, right? And also the extended family, if they're living with the extended family. What does that mean? They're listening to the stories of for example, a woman comes home and the child is sick, or the child is not feeling well, or something might have gone wrong in school, or some family member might have said something to the child. So the woman comes home and they need to calm down the child, they need to talk to the child, they need to carry out that informal psychological therapy. So that also becomes a form of a burden, right? That you're also emotionally taking care of your child and also of your husband, who might have a bad day at work and they are not doing well psychologically. So you calm down that person, and you obviously it has been found that mostly women end up emotionally counseling the other person. And even in your extended family, if your sister-in-law, if your mother-in-law isn't doing well, so you come home and you basically calm them down and you show them the brighter side to life, what you can say. So that counts as triple burden, right? And how do men again dominate in the family space is through, we've seen in my crash course I talked about the dark side of family. So mostly you say that the perpetrators or people who are carrying out this domestic violence, either be it psychological, emotional or sexual, it's basically men, and women are mostly the victims of that violence, right? So which automatically proves this argument that family is a patriarchal space, because women are mostly the victims and men are who are basically shouting at women, who are basically beating women, who are basically sexually assaulting women, right? So which tells us that men hold a superior position in the society because they're able to carry out all these ills. Also, in other cases, sociologists also found out that the perpetrators or people who were initiating child abuse, they were mostly men, right? Who were targeting children in a way that, for example, child abuse is not only physical, right? So you need to understand that we're talking everything in a very broad sense. So the child abuse isn't just hitting your child. It can be negligence, it can be anger, right? So it was found that the men generally tend to be more aggressive, and so they are shouting at the children, or they're doing a lot of work in the job space, so they tend to also neglect the child. This is also a form of abuse. You could say that this is a form of latent abuse or hidden abuse, and also it was found that mostly men tend to hit their children in a more violent way. Right, so I've talked about first 3 points, the Duncombe and Marsden, Marxist feminist dark side of family in a lot of detail, which try to prove that how family can be considered as a space where men dominate. Then there was a feminist sociologist, Anne Oakley, who carried out a study and found out family is an institution where you basically see unequal conjugal roles are being carried out. Or you see the presence of unequal conjugal roles. So we talked about the symmetrical conjugal roles or the asymmetrical conjugal roles. So here you would see asymmetrical. Symmetrical is equal. Asymmetrical is not equal. Where you see that again you see that men end up doing less work than women, right? So like I said, women are going out and earning, also looking after the household chores and also carrying out that emotional burden. And men are just going out and then coming home and relaxing. So connected to Anne Oakley's study, you can connect it to Wombat Theory. Parsons came up with this term of Wombat Theory. For men, the home is like a warm bath. For example, you get tired and you say, I'm going to take a warm bath. So he's using that metaphor for the family space, for the space that is managed by the wife, for the space that is managed by women, right? So for men who go out and working a lot, for them that space becomes like a warm bath. So they're going out, they're doing a lot of work, and when they come home, it's just like they are coming home to take a warm bath. Right? So this, you need to understand, we're not using this in a literal sense. They're not going into the washroom and taking a warm bath. It's used in a more metaphorical sense. For example, I'm again and again telling you how they come home, just chill and relax. How do they chill and relax? Is because women are the one, because the wife or the woman is the one serving them, giving them food or emotionally consoling them, or being that source of entertainment for their husband, right? So they come home and they basically feel less tired, or there's a source of relaxation for them. What's the source? It's basically woman who makes that house like a warm bath. So they relax, they chill out, and they refuel again for the next day. Which tells us that again and again more work, more burden is on the woman. So I missed out this point of Edgel's study. So it's Edgel or it's Edgel, I don't know, but it's Edgel's study, and he found out that mostly in families the important decisions were being carried out by men. For example, so I'll make this clear for you. So for example, if both the partners working, and if a woman has been promoted to a higher position and the family needs to move to a different city, it is less likely that they're going to move to a different city, rather than if a man would be given a different has been promoted and then they need to move to a different city, a different state. It is more likely that the whole family is going to move, right? So, and other economic decisions, for example, buying a house, buying a car, such decisions are being taken by men rather than by women. And if you're going to move in and out of a state, of a city, for a job, it is more likely that if men, like I said, if men are being promoted, if they find a better job in a new state, in a new city, then they're likely going to move, and it's on men's discretion in the family. So men are the one who are dominating, who are taking decisions, who are taking important decisions for the family, rather than women are not given, or they're not playing a very active role in taking those decisions. So moving on to our second last question, which is a 8-marker question. So the examiner has asked us, explain why some sociologists believe that the family is essential for the society and also the individual. So simply, like I told you, how you need to break it down, you need to simplify it, you need to find out the crux of the argument, you need to make it shorter for you. This is a very long sentence. So simply what they're asking you is what are the different functions of what are the different functions of a family? What are the different functions of the institution of family? What are the different functions of family, right? They're simply asking you that. And you need to mention 4 points and you need to elaborate them. I've talked about the different functions of families according to the functionist perspective, according to Marxist perspective, according to feminist perspective, in a much more detail in my family video, in my crash course video, and you can check that out. I can post the link in my description and you can check that out. So I've talked about that at length. I talked in a lot of detail, but I am going to just I'm going to skim through those functions in this video as well, so that you get an idea of how to answer that question, right? So like I've written, please elaborate the different functions of family. So the examiner really is asking you how. So you need to prove, like I told you before in the last question as well, there is an assumption, there is a claim that the examiner is putting that the examiner places right before you. Take it right before you is that they're asking you to prove why is the family essential, why is the institution of family essential for the society and the individual, and you give different reasons to the examiner. As you see that, for example, you see that for example, you tell the examiner that the process of socialization is very perfectly or amicably being carried out by the family. So the process of primary socialization, the first hand socialization, where the child learns how to sit, stand, how to behave, how to respect others, how to eat, these basic things, the different basic norms and values of the society, different cultural norms, cultural values of the society are being taught to the child by the family. So the first hand contact, the primary socialization, is being carried out in that family space. So primary, you could say that family is an essential part, is essential for the society and individual, because family carries out the process of primary socialization through which individuals become competent members of the society. Secondly, you see that family is a space where family is an institution that practices social control over their individual. For example, social control is when, for example, social control can be practiced through rewards and sanctions. So family is a space where the different rewards and sanctions are carried out, so that the child can learn what is good and bad, what is acceptable and what is unacceptable in the society. For example, if a child is disrespecting an elder in the family, if a child is not listening to the parents, then their behavior is going to be sanctioned. Then they might be grounded in their room, or video games might be taken away with them. So small punishments, so that they can understand this is acceptable and this is not acceptable. So disobeying others or not listening to your parents is something that is unacceptable, right? And rewards can be, for example, if you listen to your parents, or if you listen to your parents, or if you don't make mess in your room, or if you don't shout, and if you obey your parents in the right possible manner, then you're going to be rewarded for that behavior, right? In this way, the family is an institution that is socially controlling the individual and telling them what is acceptable and what is unacceptable. So what is acceptable, so the child latently learns that what is acceptable is that I need to be respectful, is that I'm not going to make a lot of mess, is that I'm going to listen to my parents, is that I'm not going to stay up late at night. These are some things that are acceptable. And how is the child learning them? It's through rewards that the family is through the rewards that the parents can give to the child. For example, they may treat them with chocolates, or they may take them out to an amusement park, right? So from a very early age, the child learns, oh, this is acceptable and this is not acceptable. So this is the second function that the family performs. Third function is of care. Now care can be your nutritional care. For example, taking care of the nutritional value. For example, they are well fed, they're eating good food, they're eating healthy food, right? It can be emotional care, like I told before. For example, a child is having a bad day and the parents come and soothe them down, or they're crying, or something might have gone wrong with them. So that is that is an emotional care. So it can be nutritional care, it can be emotional care. Then essential function of family is reproduction. Now, why is it essential? Because the society keeps on moving, keeps on thriving when more individuals come into the society and become competent members of the society and join the workforce. So the society can keep on moving and evolving, and more individuals can join, and they can obviously work for the economy. So the function of reproduction becomes essential for the society, and this is being carried out in the family. Then you see that what are the how is the family essential for the society and the individual. So what I talked about earlier, what I discussed earlier about socialization, social control, care and reproduction, these are general functions that basically functionalists tell us. These are the functions that families carry out, which make family essential for the society and also for the individual, right? But there are other views as well. For example, Marxist view of family. Marxists say that how does the family uphold the capitalistic structure of the society is by passing on those working class values. For example, you need to work hard in this capitalistic society. You don't need to disrespect your capitalistic owners. You have to, without any protest, you're going to accept the wages that they are giving you. You need to be competent, you need to be punctual, you need to be respectful in the workspace. So Marxists say that by teaching these values and by upholding these values, what the family is really doing, basically talking about the working class family, what they're doing is that they are basically letting the capitalistic society to thrive, to capitalism to thrive, and maintaining that class divide, right? So they say that what family does is that they basically maintain that class divide of the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. I'm talking more and more about the working class values, but on the flip side, you could also talk about the upper middle class values or the bourgeoisie value. What are they inculcating in their children? They're inculcating in their children that they're going to be the owners, be leaders. They're going to be owners of those large factories, and a workforce is going to work under them. And under no circumstances are you going to give them any leeway, right? And what these people are learning, for example, the working class or the proletariat are learning, it's fair what they are earning. So what the upper middle class people are instilling or feeding in their children's mind is that they deserve where they are, right? The working class deserve where they are, and we're treating them fairly, right? Very early age, their different working class values are passed on to the child, and different upper middle class values are passed on to the child who are living in each of the classes, right? And then when the child has learned these values, they maintain that class divide, which in a way upholds your capitalistic society, right? For Marxists, why is family essential for the society? It's essential for the society because it upholds the capitalistic nature of the society, because it maintains the class divide, because it and why is it important for the individual? Because it teaches the upper middle class individual and also the working class individual that the position that they are in, they deserve that position, right? So they're not going to protest against that position, right? For example, the working class are not going to protest against that position. So family becomes important for the individual as well, because it satisfies the individual with the conditions that they are in. And also family, in a way, by passing on such values, by passing on those upper middle class values or the working class values, it avoids violence, protest, unrest in the society, right? So there's also another point that I've mentioned. Why is the family essential for the society and the individual? So this is the last point you could say, that is that family basically carries out there's the regulation of sexual behavior. So what is moral, what is immoral, what is acceptable, what is unacceptable, what kind of sexual behavior is allowed, is seen as okay in the society. For example, in most societies you say that having children out of the wedlock is something that is seen as immoral. So the family makes sure that you need to get married and then have children, right? So there's a regulation of sexual behavior. At what age are you going to display certain kind of behavior? Okay, so I've deliberately not mentioned the feminist perspective of a family. Why do feminists believe the family is essential for the society and the individual? Because I thought these were enough points, and you could basically pick and choose 4 points and you can elaborate on them and you'll get full 8 marks. Okay, so finally we're left with one question, and let's just dig right deep into this. And this is a 15-mark question. It's a big deal. 15 marks are a lot of marks, and you need to do that in a more you need to be well prepared for this question, I must say. So in a 15 marks question, you always get the question like there's a for side and also an against side, and what's the phrase, what are the words through which you can judge that it's through that phrase which it's through the words, or it's through the phrase which says to what extent, right? To what extent do you believe that this is right or this is wrong? So it means that to what extent, till which extent do you see something as right and wrong? And for that, both sides are going to come in, the for side and also the against side, right? Okay, so like I told you, need to mention a for side and also the against side. But before this, we're going to read the question what the examiner is asking us. So the examiner is asking us, to what extent can living in a single parent family affect life? So it can, you're not only going to talk right away what the student might be thinking is about the negative sides of a family, right? So you're talking about a single parent family and you right away think about the negative sides. No, you need to, you can, it can affect life, it can affect an individual's life, the life of the children, in positive way, in a positive manner, also in a negative manner. So to what extent can living in a single parent family affect life? For the for side, you can say that yes, it can affect life in a negative way, right? And for the against side, you can say no, there can be some positive outcomes of living in a single parent family, rather than living in a family where both the partners are present and they're always fighting, or there can be certain emotional tensions or physical tensions between them, right? So I deliberately did that before discussing the answers with you. I told you that you need to think about this in a neutral way, not more. So you need to think about this. You need to think about sociology questions in a very broad sense. Okay? You don't need to just limit yourself to the negative side or to only the positive side, because by limiting yourself, you'll only understand one side of the argument, right? You'll not understand the other side of the argument. We're only talking about the negative side. So when you write the for side, you'll say yes, living in a single parent family can do this to you, can affect in this such and such way. So when you come to the against side, you'll be like, what can I write in this? So I told you to approach these questions with a more flexible mind, with a more broad. So understand these questions with a more broad sense, right? So domestic violence is not just hitting, right? There was also another thing that I discussed with you, which can also be used in a broad way. For example, warm bath is being used metaphorically, which makes it easier for you to understand what do we mean by this word, right? So in sociology we use one thing can be used for in multiple ways, right? So it can affect a single parent family can affect life, and mainly it affects the life of children, right? It can also affect the life of the spouses, but mainly it affects what has been found across studies is that the single parent family directly impacts the child, which can be positive and also negative. So for the for side, I've mentioned the negative sides, right? And I've supported it with different research scholars that are present in your that have been mentioned in your book, and also different theories, right? So living in a single parent family, according to functionalists, according to the new right scholars, you call this a difunctional family, right? Now what is a difunctional family? Difunctional families which can not perform the different functions of a family. For example, the care function, the socialization function, the regulation of sexual behavior. All these functions cannot be performed in the perfect way, in the most effective way, in a single parent household. Why cannot they be performed? So simple answer to that is that only one of the partner is present. So only there's only going to be one kind of socialization. For example, if a woman is taking care of the child, so the child is only going to see his or her mother as the role model, right? Okay, so how can this affect the child? So living in a difunctional family, they do not get the love, care and affection of the father. They do not get that fatherly love. I'm talking about the family in which women end up taking responsibility of their children. So they do not get that fatherly love, affection and care. They do not get that they do not see what fathers do, how fathers, what roles do fathers perform in the society, through which that child is at a disadvantage, right? Then other children who are living in, according to functionalists, who are living in fully functional family, where both the roles are present. Both the roles, I mean the motherly role and also the fatherly role. The motherly affection, love, care, affection, and also the fatherly love, care and affection. That makes a complete happy family. But single parent family is more seen as a broken family, a broken household, where both the role models are not present, where the child is deprived of where the child is deprived of one kind of love, care and affection, either it be motherly or fatherly. Then new right scholars, basically like Charles Murray, they argue that mostly women end up taking up the responsibility of taking care the responsibility of the child, and they work as single parents. Now, as single parents, when they have to look after the children, when they have to go out and earn as well, they do not end up at very high jobs, because they're not so qualified, and they also have to look after the children. So the recruiters are obviously job recruiters are not going to offer them jobs, right? Because they cannot devote a lot of time to that job. So what Charles Murray argue is that they connected to Charles Murray, the new right scholar and functionalist, both of them they basically argue that due to more rise in single parent families, you see an emergence of an underclass, right? So when women are not financially independent, when they are left jobless, when they have to look after the child as well, when they cannot fulfill their expenses, then an underclass starts to emerge, right? So, and that underclass is harmful for the society, because living in that underclass, they're going to pursue different ways to earn. For example, they're going to involve themselves in the drug economy or in the gambling economy, or they might steal things, because at the end of the day they have to feed themselves or also their child. So living in a single parent family obviously emotionally affects the child. It emotionally affects the child. Is an area where partial socialization is carried out, through which ahead in their life in future, these children may not become competent members of the society. They may, for example, they may not marry, because what has happened with their parents, they may refuse to marry. They may become more aggressive. They may become too emotional. They don't know how to vent out. So there can be multiple things that can happen with them, which is going to be visible when they grow up later, which is going to obviously, like I said, through which they do not become competent members of the society. They cannot form healthy relationships. If they're struggling from very early age, they may not focus on the studies. They may not end up at a good job. So this becomes a ripple effect. One thing goes wrong, then everything goes wrong, one after the another, right? So it can affect the child in a way where there's dysfunctional family, there is partial socialization, there's the emergence of an underclass, through which they're going to emergence of underclass, and they're going to adopt illegal ways to earn, and this, which is going to, I've talked about it earlier, which is going to have a very negative impact on the child and also their future, right? So forming unhealthy relationships, not working hard in school, being rowdy, being aggressive, not knowing how to deal with different people. Okay, so now moving on to the against side. So in the for side, I talked about the negative consequences of living in a single parent family. Now I'm going to talk about other types of consequences, which are going to be positive consequences and also alternatives to the single parent families. So living in a single parent family, you can still live like a healthy family. That is that comes in the against side, that living in a single parent family can affect your life in a positive way, or cannot affect your life at all. You are still living the life that you used to live, right? So first, I've written the point that family and friends might support you, right? So for example, a partner has left the other person, and then they have this whole bunch of family behind them that is going to support them financially and also emotionally, right? So they're not at a disadvantage, because the family is there to support them, or in other cases there are friends who can support them, who can basically fulfill that emotional need or even financial need at times. So it might not affect the spouse who's left, who is a single parent, and also the child, because all their needs are being fulfilled by another person, either be it family or either be it friends. right? And sometimes living in a single parent family can affect your life positively. So for example, I've written the second point, that living in an empty shell marriage is bad. Because what is an empty shell marriage? So empty shell marriage is a marriage arrangement where two partners live together and they also have the child, but in that marriage there is no love and affection between both the partners, right? So they live together, you could say, like robots. They do not have any feelings, they do not have any love, affection towards each other. They just fulfill their duties, and that becomes a very unhealthy place for the child, where the child is seeing that my parents are not talking to each other, or they don't have any love and affection towards each other. They're just doing their duties, and obviously this leaves a question mark in the child's head, that what kind of marriage is this? So which is going to have negative consequences for the child. Like I told you, the child may not, if the child is seeing that my parents are not conversing with each other, they're not communicating in a healthy manner, or they are always arguing with each other, or they do not have any kind of love between them, or affection or care between them, that is automatically going to be transferred to the child, and the child is going to manifest that later on in his life, where he may not be able to communicate properly, or he may not be able to express himself, or and access other life opportunities. For example, a lot of things in your life, you access those opportunities by talking to the other person, by communicating your needs and wants, by expressing yourself. For example, you go to a job and you need that job really, so that and after you're shortlisted, there is an interview, and in that interview, what they assess is how you communicate with others. Do you have those communication skills? How do you express yourself? Are you expressing yourself in a more coherent way? These skills become very important for you, and the child lacks those skills in early on his or her life, then they may face consequences in future, which is bad. So living in a dual parent family, you could say apparently it's seen as a healthy marriage, but internally it's not at all a healthy marriage. Like I told you about the reasons, there is no love, care and affection between themselves. So this, which can have negative consequences for the child, right? But living in a single parent family, on the other hand, can be in comparison to that empty shell marriage, a single parent family can be better for the child. Right? So it's not the best option, but it can be the better option out of all worst options, right? So the child is going to find some stability in his or her life. And then living in a single parent family cannot affect life so badly. So you're arguing against your negative points, right? So you're telling the examiner, yes, right, there can be negative impact on the child and also on your life, but however, there are people who can support you. For example, I discussed the idea of family supporting, your friends supporting, and also the state supporting you, state giving you welfare benefits, right? States can help you in any possible way. For example, in educational expenses or health expenses or housing expenses, which can support a single parent family, right? So which is not going to affect life so badly, right? So you're arguing against the argument that a single parent family cannot for the against side, single parent family cannot affect life so badly. So you're talking about the flip side. In the fourth side, you said yes, it is going to affect life very, very badly, right? And sometimes single parent family can be considered as a healthy family, because we're drawing comparisons to the dual parent family in which there are problems, in which there is domestic violence, in which there is no love, care and affection, in which child is being neglected, in which there is domestic abuse, there is child abuse. So living in a single parent family, when one of the spouse is separated, it could be because of other toxic reasons. For example, in that marriage, living in that apparently healthy marriage, the partners may always be fighting with each other, or they may be carrying out physical abuse or emotional abuse, and the child may be seeing that. So that family, apparently with the society, it seems healthy, but internally that family is not at all healthy for the child, right? So when separated, when the spouses are living apart from each other, either the child is living with the mother or with their father, the child is able to avoid the dark sides of the family. So he's not seeing domestic abuse, child abuse, he's not encountering child abuse or seeing physical violence or emotional abuse, right? Which is going to, like again I said, which is going to provide stability in his life, right? And which is going to make his life more easy. One of the points that I missed out was that, okay, what I've written is that there can be no contestation, there is no tussle, there is no tension between both the spouses, between both the spouses, and there can be other individual differences, or there can be other factors due to which people are living as a single parent. So, for example, there can be a reason that one of the partners might have died. So in that case, there is no tussle, there is no tension. It's just naturally that the other person has died and that person is left as a single parent, right? So it may not affect the child's life or the spouse's life. On short-term basis, it is going to affect you emotionally, but in the long run, you're going to recover with time, you're going to heal with time, and it may not affect you in such a bad way as a relationship that has ended on bad terms. And on the flip side, so one of the scenarios that I gave you is that one of the spouse has died. And then and then another scenario I would like to give you is that a relationship can also end on good terms, right? So there can be no tension, there can be no contestation between both the spouses, and they happily, or on good terms, I would say happily is not the right word to say, but on good terms, they decide that they need to live apart from each other because there are multiple reasons for that, which is not going to affect the child's in a very bad or drastic way, right? And even if we're talking about, even if the relationship has ended on bad terms and a person is living alone, is living as single parent with the child, even the reason for that emotional stress and burden cannot be that the partner has separated. There can be other reasons as well. For example, they may be suffering from poverty, or they may be suffering from some kind of disease, or there can be other factors such as belonging to a certain class, certain race, certain ethnicity, being pushed down to the social margins of the society. It is not always that the main reason will be that the other person has separated, which is why they're facing a lot of issues, which is why the child is facing a lot of issues. What we're tackling, what we're looking at, what we're trying to unlearn is that there can be other reasons as well. So there can be reasons like poverty, or they belong to a lower working class, or there are other issues in their life, right? And there are also cases, as sociologists have pointed out, that many children in single parent families, they still have contact with both the parents. So like mature adults, they decide on what days is the child going to meet with the mother or with the father, and they schedule those meetings, and they meet with both their parents. The child meets with both their parents, and he's living or she's living a healthy and happy life. And sometimes, like I told you, if a partner dies and a person is living as a single parent, it is a short-term, on short-term basis, it affects you. And also in the longer, if it affects you, if it bothers you, if it lingers on with you, you may choose to remarry or start another relationship later on in your life. So that is also an option where you see that single parent family is not going to affect the life of the individual or the child on such a massive scale. And there are also other alternatives, like I talked about other alternatives like friends and family supporting you, or there can be other reasons for why single parent for why only the single parent living in a single parent family is not the only cause of having a bad life. There can be other causes as well, and there can be support from the state. So there are different alternatives. And also lastly, there is also another alternative. There is also another scenario that living in a single parent family is not so bad as living in other types of familiar structures. For example, living in a reconstituted family where you have step parents, where you have step siblings, where people might face certain kind of criticism, or they might get mocked, or they might get called out, right? So which often happens in step families. You're not given that truest form of love, care and affection in a reconstituted family, which can badly affect the child more than living in a single parent family. So for the against side, what I'm telling you, these are certain arguments that you can write in order to convince the examiners that yes, living in a single parent family is really, really bad, but there's other alternatives to that as well, right? So living in a single parent family may not be so bad as I said in my foresight, right? So lastly, in the 15 marks question, I told you that you need to write 6 to 7 points for each side. That is going to give you full marks. And I just told you the side that you agree upon, you can write like 7 points for that, and the side that you do not agree upon, that is not your strong side, you can write 6. But it is essential that you write arguments for both the sides, because the examiner is explicitly telling you to what extent, is asking you, to what extent. So you need to mention that. Even though you write 7 for the for side, 7 for the against side, that's also completely fine, right? But the examiner just wants to see that you are debating, that you're mentioning both the sides, that you know both the sides. So he wants to basically read a debate out of a 15-mark question, and you need to write that debate, right? I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. Okay, so this marks the end of our May-June 2016 P2, in which we covered the questions from the chapter of family. If you like this video, then like every other YouTuber tells you, please subscribe and please comment down below, and also like my video, because I tend to work really hard for these videos, and I make them after revisiting, revising my notes, content, everything, and then I make sure that the video I'm making is of high quality. I'm not just blabbering around. I'm actually giving you some kind of content. I'm helping you, right? That's why I take a lot of time to record my sociology videos, because I don't want to record them in a very wishy-washy manner. I record them with with my full heart and soul, you could say. So yeah. So if you have any questions, if you have any queries, you can always comment down below, and feel free to email me as well. And yeah, just subscribe to my channel, because this gives me, again I'll say, this gives me a lot of motivation to continue. And if you subscribe, and if you want me to cover more past paper videos, you can tell me, because that's going to be my signal to make more videos, right? So thank you so much for listening, and take care.